Hey everyone, today I'm taking a look at Calimala, which is a Euro strategy board game published back in 2017. This one accommodates 3 to 5 players and takes around 75 minutes to play on average. Before I get into my review of Calimala, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer here in the UK, and if you use my discount code in the show notes, you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so the main board for Calimala is going to look like this. But before I get started, I should mention that these 3D MDF buildings are part of a deluxe expansion. They're purely there for aesthetic reasons and they will not come with the base game. But let's break down the board into the different sections. So in the top left-hand corner here, you have these 3 rows which have been filled in with these modular tiles. Now these tiles are going to show the order in which all the different categories are going to get scored. So the first thing we're going to score are the trade houses, and the last and final thing we're going to score is this building here, the Santa Maria del Fiore. Again, this is going to be completely modular, so every game you're going to be scoring things in a different way, or in a different order at least. And I should say this is an area majority style game. You have the 4 different buildings here. And the idea is that we're going to be trying to fill in all these different squares with our cubes to show we have majorities in these regions. So essentially, this Palazzo Vecchio only has the artwork here, but in fact, all the other buildings have the 3 different resources. You have wood, brick, and marble, as well as the decoration or artwork there. Again, which we're going to get competing over, because when it gets to that point on the board, i.e. Who's got the most artwork on the board, who's got the most wood donated on the board, or even each of the buildings are going to score individually. Again, whoever's got the majority in each of those categories will score the bigger bunch of points. And you also have the map here, which is broken down into 2 different categories, I suppose. You've got these coastal regions here, or these ports, which are linked by these boats. So you have London, Lisbon, and Barcelona, and you also have these 3 inland cities here, which are depicted by these trade houses. So you have Troyes, Bruges, and Hamburg. And more importantly, in the bottom left-hand section, you have the main part of the board where actions are taken. So you can see here that much like the top part here, all these tiles have been randomly distributed on these different empty squares. And these are all the different actions you can take throughout the game. And the way you take these actions is by placing a disc of your colour, like so, onto a spot that is adjacent to two different actions, and then you get to resolve them both. But we'll talk about how that works in a little bit. Each player is also going to have their own personal player board that look like this, where you have your storage capacity to store wood, bricks, and marble, and also the silk or the cloth, which is the kind of main resource in the game. Each player is also going to have a bunch of their cubes, a bunch of discs, depending on the player count. You're going to have your own colour, and you're also going to have these white discs, which are pretty powerful if you use them correctly. And you've also got some of these trade houses and ships, which you can pay for and unlock as the game goes on. And you're also going to have a deck of action cards here, which you can acquire as the game goes on. Now, also at the start of the game, we did select a secret objective here. So you can see here by the end of the game, I want to have the majority in the San Miniato building, because if I do, I'm going to get 5 points. Second place is going to get 3 points, and first place is only going to get a single point. This will be kept secret. However, there is also a public objective. You can see here, Hamburg is getting competed over. Again, the person with the most cubes in Hamburg by the end of the game is going to get those 5 points, 3 points, and 1 point accordingly. So it goes without saying that the person with the most victory points at the end of the game will be the winner, and the game is going to get ended by the time that all these different tiles have been resolved and scored, or until all the players have played all of their discs. And even if you play your discs before all the regions have been scored, then you're still going to continue until all these different regions are resolved. Now, the main turn order in this game, or the way the game works, is so simple. And I suppose one of the cool things about this game is that there is no real phases or rounds you need to play through. You just keep playing, and when certain things happen, that will trigger a scoring, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So let's touch on again how the main mechanism actually works. So let's say it's the yellow player's turn. They're going to have the option to place their disc, either their own colour or a white one, like so, on any of these action spots. So let's just say I wanted to go here, like so. That means I could take a wood action and a brick action in any order I want. So I can do this one first and then this one, or vice versa. Now these ones are rather simple, where all you're going to do is for each action you've taken, you're going to take one resource of that type and add it to your player board, like so. So that's a wood action and a brick, like so. Now the other resource, i.e. the marble, works in the exact same way, and also the cloth works in a pretty much identical way, where you'll add a cloth to your storehouse, like so. However, if throughout the game you end up acquiring more of these cloth warehouses, if you take that cloth action, you actually fill all of your cloth houses up by one resource. So you're going to be a lot more efficient if you end up building more of those. And that ties into the build action here. And when you take that build action, you can build one of 3 different types of building. The first of which we already just mentioned, which is where you spend a wood and a brick to build one of these new warehouses. You can spend 2 brick to build a trade house in one of these 3 trade cities. So let's just say I wanted to build in Troyes here, like so. I could do that. Or finally, you've got the ship building action, where you can spend 2 wood and add a ship to your main board here, just to show your shipping capacity and when it comes to sending cloth to these port cities. The donate action in the center here allows you to contribute either a wood, a brick, or a marble to either of these buildings. So when you go to do that, you're going to take the resources. So I've got a wood here, and I'm going to add it to any of these rows. Let's just say I wanted this one here, because that is my secret objective at the end of the game, to have the most coverage in San Maniato. The decoration action works in pretty much the exact same way, where you're going to take one of your marble resources, if you have any, and add it to one of those rows here. And the final 2 actions here, the trade house action and the shipping action, work very similarly, where with the trade house action you are going to remove a cloth resource from your storage for each trade house you have. So you can see here I've got one in Troyes and one in Bruges, and therefore I can add a resource to Troyes and Bruges. Now if I had one in Hamburg as well, I could do all 3 of them. The shipping action works, again, very similarly, where for each ship you have, you can send off resources to the different port cities. So again, I had 2 ships, therefore I might want to go one here and maybe one in Barcelona, like so. Now, the white discs work in pretty much the same way, however, they offer double the rewards, at least in the immediate effect, where if you place it, you can take 2 of this action and 2 of this action, again, in any order you want. So I could do one of these, and then one of these, and one of these, or I could do 2 of these, and then 2 of these, again, whatever order you want. So from what I've explained so far, it might sound pretty vanilla, but this is where the magic starts to happen. So say in a future turn, the blue player also wants to take this action because they want some bricks and they want some wood. They are going to place their disc on top of mine like normal and take those corresponding resources. However, because there is now a player underneath it, they are also going to have that action triggered. So the yellow player here is also going to get a wood and a brick. Now in a future turn, say the yellow player wants to go here for another time, for a second time, they are going to get their normal rewards, that wood and their brick. The blue player is also going to get their wood and their brick, and the yellow player underneath it again is also going to get that brick and that wood. Now, if there is ever a 4th disc placed on top like so, you will resolve it as normal. However, the disc at the bottom here, this yellow one, is going to get removed, and it's also going to go onto the first scoring tile like so. And that is going to trigger that particular tile's scoring. So you can see here, this trade house tile means that all of the trade houses are going to get scored as kind of one in its entirety. So you can see here, only the yellow player has any coverage on those trade house cities, so therefore they are going to get 3 points. Now if in the future, say the blue player had a cube here, and it would be like a first place and a second place. The first place is going to get 3 points, second place is going to get 2 points, and third place is going to get 1 point. Now if there's ever a tie, as in say both players had 2 cubes in those trade houses, then it's also going to go back to who has placed the most discs on these scoring objectives. And if it's still a tie, then it's going to be who has placed the discs first. Now, if a white disc is ever removed from the bottom, so let's just say here the blue takes this action, again, they'd all resolve the actions as normal, and then this white disc would slide out. Now, rather than this white disc going on the next objective, you're actually going to replace it with a disc of that player's colour, again, the player who triggered that scoring effect, and they're going to place their disc on it. However, they are going to get this white disc back into their supply, meaning that they've got that double action to be taken again. So now, if I ever take an action which I cannot fully resolve, i.e. let's say I went here, I could ship to these port cities, but let's say I didn't have enough marble to build one of these decorations. Therefore, I would have the ability to draw one of these action cards, which I can use at any time during my future turn. So this will give me one of those trade house actions so I can ship off cloth whenever I want to do that. And that applies to all the different ones as well. So let's just say I took a marble action, but I did not have any capacity to store any marble. Therefore, I would get to draw an action card. Or I took the building action and I couldn't build anything. Therefore, I would draw an action card. And as I mentioned earlier, you're going to keep on playing until all of these scoring tiles have been resolved, or until the players have placed all their discs, which will still lead to all the tiles being resolved. And then the player with the most points at the end of the game will be the winner, factoring in these public and private objectives as well. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on Calimala. And I suppose the natural place to start is with the action system. So on the face of it, this is cool enough as it is, where you pick one of these spots, place your disc on it, and you get the two adjacent actions. Now, this is huge because sometimes you might just want one action and you're not so fussed with the other one. So say I really wanted this trade house action, but I didn't want a shipping action yet. I didn't want one of these cloth actions yet. It means I might want to do something else before I go there so I can get the full benefits from it rather than just taking the compensation of one of those action cards. So that's cool enough as it is, but especially when it's got the modularity involved. But that paired with the way these discs interact with each other it just takes this to a whole new level, because you have to be very careful about who you're helping when you take certain things. You know, if I really wanted to take this action here, and I have to bear in mind that the blue player is also going to get that action, and they're going to get those actions after me as well. So it means that if there's an objective that's coming up that's relating to bricks, I might want to get those bricks so I can donate them, but it means that the blue player is also going to get those bricks and donate them, and they're going to get final say on it, or at least get a say after me, so that they can maybe swing things back in their favour. And on top of all of this, the layers that come in when it comes to the scoring just takes us to another dimension beyond that, because I might want an action here, I might really want these resources. There's already 3 discs on there, meaning that if I go there again, not only am I going to get the resources, the other people are going to get their resources, but it's also going to trigger the next scoring, which I could or could not be ready for. So I love the way that works. You know, when is the time to trigger these things? The planning as well in the way that these come out is just absolutely genius, because you have to really kind of read the map here, thinking, what am I going to invest in? When am I going to hold back? Or what am I going to go for? For example, by reading the first row here, I know that the trade houses are going to score. It's going to be 2 port cities, and then it's going to be Troyes and Bruges scoring, which might mean that I might want to go really heavy in the trade houses, get a couple of those down, hopefully get the majority there, but also put my cubes in Troyes and Bruges because I know it's coming up for scoring soon. And maybe I'm going to neglect London and Barcelona in order to do that, to try and get the overall gain. And you know, you got to really pick your battles in this one. If you're falling behind on something, you might want to read further on the scoring criteria and think, you know what, I'm willing to take a hit here and here in order to score big here. And the way that you'll synergize with each other is also fantastic, because as I said, the trade houses will score, but then each individual city will score, and the same will apply to the ports. And the same applies to the buildings, because, yeah, the wood will score, the bricks will score, the marble will score, and the decoration will score, but also that each individual building will score. So it's all about that timing on when you're going to invest things, when you're going to start withdrawing, going somewhere else, just holding onto that lead by as small a distraction as possible. And as soon as that tile's scored, you can know when to cut your losses and move on to the next thing. And I love that degree of strategy. It just adds so much, like a longer thread of kind of thinkiness throughout the entire game. I enjoy how good each of the different things you can build are. Yeah, the ships are fantastic because it lets you get into the port cities. Obviously the trade houses are great because it lets you get into those inland cities, but also you want these warehouses so that you can produce cloth a lot faster to get them into those cities in the first place. And something that I did kind of consider is, why wouldn't I always just build up my engine as quickly as I could to try and get the full benefits from these buildings? And that's because by the time you do that, there's probably going to be several of these things already have scored, and people are going to start running away from you and having more and more coverage in those different categories. So you really do have to pace yourself, and again, read the strategy of the scoring tiles here, because there might not even be a bunch of ports scoring until the very end, meaning that you do not have to worry about that, at least for the first, 2/3 of the game. The idea of being compensated with these action cards if you do not get to take the full benefit from an action, I think it's a nice touch, because this could have easily been a game where if somebody takes an action, you get your disc resolved underneath it, but you do not have the capacity for it, for example. That goes to waste, and that's just tough. That's on you. Whereas this one has made that extra effort to be a bit more lenient, a bit more forgiving, and make you feel more powerful for doing so, which, I would have been perfectly happy either way. But yeah, if I had to choose, I would say that this is the better of those two options. The way the white discs are incorporated is also clever, because yeah, they're fantastic when you use them straight away, because you get to take those double actions, or each action twice, which is pays really quick compensation. But it does mean that if people go there after you, you do not get to take the fallout action, because again, white discs are not assigned to you personally. And it also means that you are almost giving a bit of a risk on there, because if you put your disc down and somebody else ends up placing their 4th disc down and taking the white disc, they're going to get it back into their supply and also claim the objective themselves. So there is that kind of double-edged sword of playing those white discs, and you need to know when the right time to use them is. Now, something that's become a bit of a cliche, and I'm guilty of this, is by reviewers calling games elegant or smooth. If there's ever an example of that word being used to describe a game, then this might be it, because I want to reiterate that there is no round structure, there is no housekeeping, there's no fiddliness, there's no convolution at all in this game. All you're doing is placing your disc and taking the actions. If you get that 4th disc on a stack, then you do a scoring, and then you continue. So I love that. I think that's one of the coolest features of this game, is that you can come back to this without a long time playing it. You do not need to recall or remember any rules minutiae, anything like that. All silky smooth, all logical. It flows wonderfully, and yeah, just an absolute breeze to kind of digest and understand. The variability purely comes from the way that these tiles are laid out, and that is more than enough for me, because it does change the gameplay experience massively. The action tiles are going to change huge, because let's say 2 resources are right next to each other. Early in the game, that is going to get really loaded on, and it might mean that the first few regions are going to get scored rather quickly. Or if they're more spread out, it might be a bit more difficult to get resources, meaning that they're probably going to get resolved in a slower manner. But yeah, I love the way that these different actions are paired with each other, and the way that kind of affects the gameplay. And again, I want to reiterate how much the scoring order of these tiles really does change the pacing of the game. Maybe you've got all the cities clustered next to each other, so therefore you can really focus on those trade houses, and then by the time it gets to the halfway through the game, you can focus on something else. Or maybe there'll be half of the cities at the start of the game and half at the end, meaning that you have to be really aware of that from start to finish, and you cannot just forget it and move on to the next thing. The decision to make this a low-scoring game, for each tile dishing out 3, 2 or 1 points, I think that's a very clever one, because it does mean that if you fall behind a bit early, you do have plenty of opportunity to catch back up. And it does mean that if somebody's gone to completely stockpiled on one region, they're not going to get those huge point swings that are going to be impossible to catch back up upon. So you really want to be winning each region by a small margin as possible, which kind of incentivizes everyone to keep on, mixing with each of the different categories. Calimala does take around 60 to 75 minutes to play, which is naturally a bit shorter than most Euros out there. This one doesn't forsake any strategy or depth by offering that time frame. So yeah, that's a really good touch. Not often do you get to play games of this depth, or this quality in that succinct time frame. So yeah, full props for that. Let's briefly talk about the production for the game, which all in all, I'm very happy with. Yes, it's your standard beige looking Euro, which, to be fair, is going to detract a lot of people. I don't think this is a game that's going to invite non-Euro gamers to try out these type of games, because it does have this, this beige aesthetic, which is a big turner for a lot of people. But physically, the production is very good. You got your standard Euro components here, your discs, your little houses and your boats and things. But the cardboard stock is high quality, very strong cardboard tiles there. The cubes, a little bit fiddly, I suppose, but nothing major to worry about. I think these deluxe components here, which you can buy for relatively cheap, from my understanding, they are superfluous. But I suppose these little perspex plastic things are nice to keep everything in place, because they do have little holes to keep your cubes in. And the same applies to the player boards. They're perfectly functional. All the iconography is well depicted here, and I've got no complaints at all regarding the production. Definitely not overdone, but not underdone either. Okay, so let's share some final thoughts on Calimala, which I have to say came along at just the right time for me, because more and more I'm starting to appreciate and enjoy games with the high depth that I like, but with lower and lower complexity. And this game might just be the textbook definition of that. There really are very few rules in this game. Some very basic area majority, which, yeah, let's be honest, is very familiar with a ton of dick games out there, but the way it ties back to this key mechanism is a stroke of genius. And it goes to show that you do not need all those fiddly rules to make a rich game. Now, I think without the way the discs interact with each other, this would still be a solid one. But the fact that you do trigger other people's discs when you lay on top of them just takes this game to a whole new dimension and makes the consequences of your action more and more meaningful. The variation in which these tiles come out changes each game massively. And you know what? This is just a breeze to play and digest, but still offers a rich, enjoying and satisfying experience. So yeah, I really cannot praise this one enough when it comes to the mechanical side of things and the decision space. I think that this is definitely one of those games that's not going to change anybody's mind in terms of getting them into the Euro genre of games, because it does have a certain aesthetic to it, which is going to be a turn off to a lot of people. But if you are a nuts and bolts kind of person and you just appreciate good game design, then this is certainly one to try and hunt down if you can. Unfortunately, I think it is out of print at the moment, but hopefully that will change sooner rather than later, because this one definitely does deserve to be out there, available. And it does have those, almost has those kind of vibes that a lot of the classic Euros out there have. That, again, going back to that low complexity, high depth, the games like Cancer Teutonica and stuff like that, this is what really does kind of spark similarities with me. So yeah, I think this game is brilliant. I think it's fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to playing it more and more. Unfortunately, yeah, it does only play 3 players up, but if you do have that gaming group, then I really recommend you check out Calimala.